Hey, hi everyone. Welcome back to the another video of API security series. So in this video, we are going to discuss about the second most exploited vulnerability of OWASP top 10 API category, which is broken authentication. So इस वीडियो में we will discuss about like what is broken authentication, what are some common attacks in broken authentication, and what is basically the root cause that leads to broken authentication vulnerability in any API. Then we'll see some demonstration, live demonstration, like how we can exploit it, how we can enumerate the API, whether if it's vulnerable to that broken authentication or not. Then we will discuss about some examples as well, and then we will discuss with the prevention steps that we can include in our API to secure our APIs from the vulnerability called broken authentication. So let's get started with the video. So now let's understand what is actually broken authentication. So in very simple terms, broken authentication is a security flaw where an application's authentication system fails to properly verify and protect user identities. Suppose इस in very simple terms कि आपने अपने घर में एक लॉक लगाया है, मतलब एक डोर पे एक लॉक लगाया है, एंड दैट लॉक इज नॉट फंक्शनिंग प्रॉपरली, सो एनीवन कैन गेट इनटू योर हाउस even though they are not supposed to enter. So the same thing is with APIs like broken authentication. Now you can see an example on your screen as well. So there is an healthcare mobile application. So there are, let's say, n number of endpoints on that API or for that mobile application. Now let's say there is an endpoint called user profile where you can access your profile information like what's the patient ID and what are your health routine, checkup routine, and all those things. But there is another endpoint called admin slash get passwords. So now this endpoint is little sensitive. Why? Because this endpoint is storing all the credentials or all the passwords of the users of the application. Now, suppose this endpoint is not properly secured. Anyone can access this, anyone can access the data present in that endpoint. So, this is what broken authentication means to. When your authentication system is in place or even not in place, but it's not working properly or it's not functioning as is desired to, not protecting the sensitive endpoints, the sensitive data, then we can say that there is a broken authentication vulnerability in the API. Authentication is like lock on your account, keeping your data safe. But what if that lock is broken? Attackers now can get in and access the data, right? So let's look some of the common attacks that exploit broken authentication. So I have listed down some of the names of the common attacks that are involved in broken authentication. So the first point is our credential stuffing. So credential stuffing is a technique where an attacker use the exposed passwords or breached password. So let's say हमारा कोई यूजर नेम पासवर्ड किसी भी एक डेटा ब्रीच में ब्रीच हुआ था, और वो डेटा ब्रीच का डेटा जो है इट्स पब्लिकली अवेलेबल either on dark web or any of the forums. सो अटैकर क्या करेगा, उस यूजर नेम पासवर्ड पेयर को यूज करेगा अगेंस्ट दैट यूआरएल दैट इज अवेलेबल इन दैट डेटा ब्रीच डेटा. सो अगर वो पासवर्ड और यूजर नेम पेयर पासवर्ड क्रेडेंशियल्स बेसिकली मैच हुए, तो they will lead to unauthorized access to our account. This is the first technique, or you can say that the first attack. Then second is the missing or bypassing authentication. So this is very simple na. So sometimes what happens, some of the endpoints are protected with the authentication, but some of them are like even missing authentication, or there are some methods through which we can bypass that authentication. Now let's understand, there is an application जिसमें दो एंड पॉइंट है. वन इज स्लैश प्रोफाइल एंड द सेकंड इज स्लैश प्रोफाइल स्लैश चेंज पासवर्ड. Now, to access the first endpoint, which is profile endpoint, there is an authentication which is required. But we found to access the change password endpoint, there is no authentication required. So now this is a case of missing authentication. Now anyone can access that endpoint, and can change the password of any user. So this is what missing or bypassing authentication. So there are various techniques of bypassing authentications. We will talk them later in another video, or we'll discuss it later on. Now, third point is default credentials. So default credentials, like you found them in many instances. Sometimes developers or DevOps team are like in a hurry, or we can say that they need to deploy the process, or they need to deploy the servers and all those things, of like before the deadline, or deadline is very near. So what they do, they use the default credentials. Let's say they are using guest password credentials, admin credentials, very weak and very default credentials. Now if any service is in production, or is like exposed on the internet and having a default password enabled, like it is a risk to the organization, right? Now fourth point is password spraying. So password spraying is simple, like हमारे पास लिस्ट ऑफ पासवर्ड है और हम उसको यूजर नेम पासवर्ड की चेक लिस्ट में हिट एंड ट्रायल मेथड देख रहे हैं, और कोई भी पासवर्ड मैच हुआ किसी भी यूजर नेम से, देन वी गॉट द एक्सेस टू दैट एंड बेसिकली द एंड पॉइंट. नाउ देर आर टू टर्म्स जिसमें लाइक इंटरव्यूज में भी बहुत बार क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है, एंड पीपल आर ऑल्सो कंफ्यूज बिटवीन दीज टू. फर्स्ट थिंग इज सेशन हाईजैकिंग, the second thing is session fixation. Now, very simple terms, if I talk about hijacking, stealing someone's valid session token or cookie to impersonate them and access their account is called hijacking. Now you can see that in the below image. So क्या हुआ कि विक्टिम और वेब सर्वर में एक लेट्स से एक रिक्वेस्ट भेजी और एक सेशन आईडी हुई. बट अटैकर ने क्या करा, उस सेशन आईडी को स्निफ कर लिया. लाइक देयर आर वेरियस मेथड्स थ्रू विच वी कैन स्टील द सेशन आईडी ऑफ एनी ऑफ आवर विक्टिम और एनी ऑफ द यूजर. थ्रू दोस टेक्निक्स उसने उस सेशन आईडी को हाईजैक किया, बेसिकली स्टील किया. और अब वो नेक्स्ट स्टेप में जब वो लॉग इन करेगा तो वो सेम सेशन आईडी यूज कर रहा है. नाउ if that web server, or if that web application is allowing that attacker to use the same session id, then we say that it's a broken authentication, because वहां पे session id चेक ही नहीं हुआ कि किस यूजर की session id है, और बेसिकली जिस यूजर की session id है क्या वो ही यूजर एक्सेस कर रहा है एप्लीकेशन को कि नहीं कर रहा. So this is what we called hijacking. Second is fixation. Basically, when we are forcing a user to use a session ID that the attacker already knows. So then waiting for them to log in. So as you can see in the second example, in the second image, basically, you see like there is a process of proper authentication. Like first the victim is attacker is authenticating and then getting the session ID. And now attacker ने क्या करा, वही सेशन आईडी यूजर को किसी भी लेट से एक फिशिंग ईमेल भेजा या कोई भी तरीके से वो सेशन आईडी उसको पास आउट करा विद द यूआरएल ऑफ दैट एप्लीकेशन. नाउ अब वो यूजर को बोल रहे हैं कि तुम यही सेशन आईडी को यूज करो, एंड व्हेन विक्टिम और दैट यूजर इज यूजिंग login through that URL that is provided by attacker and got success in authentication, then this is called session fixation. एक बहुत बेसिक से एग्जांपल से समझते हैं. हाईजैकिंग में क्या हुआ कि लेट्स से कि एक होटल रूम है और हमने किसी भी होटल रूम की एक आईडी कार्ड जो होता है, की कार्ड होता है बेसिकली, वो हमने स्टील कर लिया. नाउ हम किसी के जिस बंदे का हमने स्टील किया था हम उसके रूम को एक्सेस कर सकते हैं. सो दिस इज व्हाट हाईजैकिंग इज. अब फिक्सेशन क्या हुआ, लाइक लेट्स से यू आर द रिसेप्शनिस्ट देयर एंड आप चाहते हो कि जो विक्टिम है हमारा उसको वो स्पेसिफिकली वही होटल का रूम मिले जिसमें दैट यू हैव प्लांटेड समथिंग और समथिंग लाइक दैट बेसिकली. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड फिक्सेशन. हमने उसको वही की कार्ड दिया, वही रूम का की कार्ड दिया जो हम चाहते थे. So this is what the difference between hijacking and fixation. So I hope you understand the difference, so that you won't confuse between what is hijacking and what is fixation. So now that we know what are the common attacks that lead to broken authentication vulnerability, but why this vulnerability exists or how this vulnerability exists in any API. So let's understand some रूट कॉजेस ऑफ ब्रोकन ऑथेंटिकेशन। सो हमें ये चीज़ पहले ही पता है कि जब भी एक ऑथेंटिकेशन सिस्टम फेल होता है टू प्रॉपरली फंक्शन, टू प्रॉपरली ऑथेंटिकेट और टू प्रॉपरली प्रोटेक्ट द डेटा, देन दिस vulnerability exists. सो वो ऑथेंटिकेशन फेलियर होते कैसे हैं? सो लाइक आई हैव मेंशन सम 5 पॉइंटर्स. सो फर्स्ट इज पुअर पासवर्ड मैनेजमेंट. सो लेट्स से लाइक that application or that API is allowing weak passwords or storing the passwords in plain text credentials. So that is poor password management. Second is poor session management. So poor session management will be, let's say कि you logged in 1 year ago and there is a session token generated. अब आप 1 साल बाद या 2 साल बाद वही session token use करोगे and you are directly authenticated to the application because there is no expiry of that session or that token that you have generated 1 or 2 years ago. So this is the bad practice of an authentication system. Third thing is insufficient authentication logic. So as we already discussed that profile endpoint was authenticated, but change password endpoint was not authenticated. So this is the authentication logic is not properly implemented on all the endpoints available in the API or available in the application. Fourth point is improper rate limiting. So rate limiting is basically, let's say कि you have noticed इन मैनी ऑफ द एप्लीकेशंस कि आप 3-4 बार जब कोई रॉन्ग पासवर्ड डालते हो तो यू विल गेट ब्लॉक्ड फॉर सम एन आवर और लेट्स से फॉर 30 मिनट्स. सो ये रेट लिमिटिंग होती है, बट लेट्स से ये रेट लिमिटिंग इम्प्लीमेंटेड ही नहीं है एक एप्लीकेशन में. तो वहाँ क्या होगा, हम एक बहुत लेट्स से हमने 1000 वर्ड की पासवर्ड की वर्ड लिस्ट ले ली. अब हम क्या करेंगे, वो 1000 वर्ड्स को चेक करते रहेंगे कि क्या ये पासवर्ड है, क्या ये पासवर्ड है. इफ एनी ऑफ दैट मैच्ड, वी गॉट एन अनऑथराइज्ड एक्सेस. बट अगर रेट लिमिटेड होगा या रेट लिमिटिंग प्रॉपर्ली इम्प्लीमेंटेड होगी तो हम 3-4 पासवर्ड बाद ही हमारा अकाउंट लॉक हो जाएगा. सो आवर स्क्रिप्ट विल नॉट रन प्रॉपर्ली और वी विल नॉट like it will take some time or they we need some bypasses to bypass that rate limiting and all those things. But अगर rate limiting नहीं होगा तो that will lead to unauthorized access. So in that example only in the second image basically this is an image of rate limiting only कि हमने एक brute forcing tool ले लिया and we are just sending millions of password. हमने वो login page पे बहुत सारे passwords try करे and after that like let's say after 1000 or 2000 attempts we found there is a password which matched and we are like now access to the dashboard or to any of the endpoints that was protected. So this is what rate limiting is. Then insecure communication, like you have heard it multiple times ki uh, sensitive things or sensitive endpoints are running on HTTP instead of HTTPS. So वही चीज़ है कि अगर हम पासवर्ड्स भी अपने HTTP पे भेजेंगे इंस्टेड ऑफ HTTPS, so लेट्स से कोई अटैकर है हमारा नेटवर्क को स्निफ कर सकता है, नेटवर्क ट्रैफिक को देख सकता है, मॉनिटर कर सकता है एंड लाइक इफ अगर वो पासवर्ड प्रोटेक्टेड नहीं होगा और वो ऐसे ही विदाउट एनी इंक्रिप्शन जा रहा होगा, so anyone can steal those passwords as well. So these are some common or basic root causes that could lead to broken authentication in any API or in any app, in any application. So to secure that API or to secure the application APIs, we need to properly implement the authentication mechanisms and like a proper logic, proper mechanism, rate limiting, using HTTPS and proper session management, all those. Till now, we understood what is broken authentication, like what is its root cause, what are the common attacks available in broken authentication. Let's deep dive into understanding how broken authentication looks like on a code level. So I have put a vulnerable code and a secure code scenario. So let's take up the vulnerable code scenario. So on the left hand side, you will see like there is a function which is used to generate the token based on the user ID provided. Now in the vulnerable code, I highlighted how the token is generated. So as you can see, there is a constant string user underscore, then we are giving the user ID and then we are using the time. Now you can see this token is very weak. Let's say anyone can get your user ID. And what they will do, let's say they put up the time and they just create a new token of your account or anyone's account. Now, how attacker can use this token scenario to take over your account? So they will generate a token based on your user ID, and they will override this newly generated token with their own token. Now, if the application is vulnerable and there is no further check of tokens, then the attacker will able to take over your account easily. Now, how we can secure this mechanism? Basically, the token generation mechanism. So, as we already know, like we have to generate tokens like that are randomly generated tokens, and they should have some entropy in them. So, let's look at how the secure code looks like. Now, you can see in the secure code, we are generating a token, basically a hex token, and then we are setting up the expiry as well. Now, once we got these two values, we are storing our token in the session store as a token as a key parameter there. Now we are putting the user ID and expiry in it. Now, why we are saying this token generation mechanism is more secure than the previous one? Because the token value is random, and we are also setting up a expiry value. Let's say we set up expiry value for 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes we have to generate a new token, so that we are able to uh, access those resources that are behind the authentication or that are secure. Now, this is a secure process of generating the token and making sure like no one can understand the token pattern, or no one will able to take over your account based on the token parameter. So even if that token is exposed there, first thing is a randomly generated hex value, and hex values are with high entropy. You can just, instead of 32, you can use 64 as well to generate long tokens as well. We can use JWT token. So these are some different scenarios like JWT token and all. We will talk about the JWT token in some another video, not in this video. So this is how a basic scenario of a vulnerable code and a secure code of broken authentication looks like. I hope you understand this, like कि हमें एक vulnerable code broken authentication का कैसा होगा in terms of token generation, और एक secure code हम कैसे generate एक secure code हम कैसे लिख सकते हैं for token generation mechanism. टिल नाउ वी अंडरस्टूड कि ब्रोकन ऑथेंटिकेशन क्या होता है, क्या रूट कॉज हैं, क्या एक कोड लेवल पे ब्रोकन ऑथेंटिकेशन हाउ इट लुक्स लाइक. तो लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द फाइनल पार्ट ऑफ द वीडियो, which is the mitigations that we can use to build a secure API that will prevent broken authentication specifically. So I have put some 4 5 pointers कि जिससे आप देख के मतलब आप समझ सकते हो, और you can provide the remediation steps or mitigation steps to your organization or to whomsoever you are doing a assessment, or you are doing a bug bounty basically. So first point is most of the times जो broken authentication होता है, जैसे API endpoints पे rate limiting नहीं होती है, and session expiries नहीं होती हैं, और जो क्या बोलते हैं वीक पासवर्ड चेक्स होते हैं वो इम्प्लीमेंटेड नहीं होते हैं, सेशन एक्सपायर टोकन एक्सपायर नहीं होता है. सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स. सो फर्स्ट पॉइंट इज बेसिकली rate limiting should be implemented, proper session token expiry should be implemented, and secure को secure authentication checks like कोई पासवर्ड वीक तो नहीं है, all these things should be checked properly. Applications can use multi-factor authentications, and session tokens बहुत short lived होने चाहिए. So I talked about कि expiry होनी चाहिए, तो expiry वो ज़्यादा नहीं होनी चाहिए. जैसे you put up expiry for 24 hours, ऐसा नहीं. तो expiry should be very short, like either 30 minutes or 40 minutes, something like that. And you have to use a standard authentication mechanism or token mechanisms, like हम JWT tokens use कर सकते हैं, and other methods like bearer tokens, all those things, API keys, all those things we can use it for tokens or for authentication mechanisms. And there should be a proper implementation of API gateways, so that इसमें हेल्प ये भी होती है कि डेवलपर को भी हेल्प होती है कि एक सेंट्रलाइज्ड गेटवे होगा और एक सेंट्रलाइज्ड मैकेनिज्म होगा जहाँ से आप अपना पूरा एपीआई को मैनेज कर सकते हो. सो इट विल हेल्प देम टू इन डीबगिंग प्रोसेस एज वेल, एंड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि प्रोसेस कहाँ पे लैक कर रहा है और हमें कहाँ पे इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करना चाहिए. और हम अगर एपीआई गेटवे पे अच्छी सिक्योरिटी लगाएंगे, so it will hard to penetrate into other API endpoints or to access our server or database or backend services basically. So these are some mechanisms or like which we can use कि mitigation कैसे हो सकता है. Now that one thing, like ये वीडियो थोड़ा लंबा हो रहा था, so I put up a demonstration of how we can attack an API for broken authentication. So I put up a demo for Bola as well. So, but that was a little short video, but it's got extended. This video got extended. So, एक पूरा demonstration, एक पूरा explanation ki how we can attack for broken authentication, I will put in the next video. For now, stay tuned, stay connected, stay safe, and let me know if you have any feedback. If you have any questions, jump into my DM, or you can put up in the comment section as well. Thank you so much.